The stars were silent when the Aelari fleet drifted through the endless dark. Once their ships had shined like silver wings across the sky. Now they were broken, hulls torn, engines dead, and hope fading fast. Only a handful of ships still had power, their lights flickering like dying candles in the cold of space. Inside the command bridge of the last cruiser, Captain Ilara of the Aelari stared at the cracked view screen. She could still see the burning remains of their world behind them, just a dim orange glow now. The Varkun had taken everything. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "Transmit the distress signal again." A young officer turned from his console. "Captain, we've already sent it to every known system. No one is answering." "Then send it again," she said. "There must be someone out there." The officer obeyed. A burst of static went across the comms as the message left their ship. It carried their last plea into the galaxy, a simple SOS encoded in every major language. They offered everything they had: knowledge, technology, allegiance. Anything if someone would help them before the Varkun found them again. In the silence that followed, Ilara closed her eyes. She remembered her homeworld, the blue seas and shining towers that now lay in ruin. The Varkun had come without warning. They took cities, destroyed fleets, and harvested entire populations. The Aelari had tried to resist, but they were not built for war. They were explorers, scientists, dreamers. And dreamers die fast when monsters arrive. The deck shook as another power conduit failed. Ilara gripped the edge of her chair to steady herself. Around her, officers worked with quiet panic. They were trying to look calm, but the smell of burnt circuitry and the sound of life support alarms made it clear the end was near. "Captain," the officer said after a moment, "we're picking up something." A response. Every head turned. The bridge went silent except for the low hum of the failing reactor. "Put it through," Ilara ordered. Static filled the speakers at first. Then a deep, steady voice came through, clear and strong. "This is Admiral Reyes of the Terran Armada. We received your distress call." "Hold tight. We're coming," Ilara frowned. "Terran Armada?" she whispered. The name meant nothing to her. One of the science officers looked up in alarm. "Captain, I know that name. The Terrans. They're the Deathworlders." The word fell like ice into the room. Everyone froze. Even the background noise seemed to fade. Ilara stared at him. "Deathworlders? You mean the ones from the restricted sector?" He nodded quickly. "Sector 9X, a quarantine region. No one goes there. The Council labeled their homeworld a Class 12 death world. It said nothing that grows there can be tamed. Even their oceans are lethal. The Terrans evolved there." The crew began whispering among themselves. Stories flooded back, tales of a violent species that survived on a planet that killed everything else. They were said to have built their ships from the bones of their wars, to have tamed the storms of their deadly world. They fought each other for centuries and somehow didn't die out. Instead, they became stronger. No one in the known galaxy had seen a Terran fleet in person. The few that claimed to had described them as monsters in metal, soldiers who never surrendered, never stopped, and never forgave. Ilara's throat went dry. "We had sent an SOS to them?" The officer who had sent the signal looked pale. "I didn't know, Captain." The message went wide-band. Anyone could have picked it up. The comm crackled again. The same calm human voice spoke once more, cutting through their fear. "Your coordinates are confirmed. ETA, 18 minutes. Do not attempt to move. We will handle everything from here." Ilara tried to respond, but her words caught in her throat. Handle everything? What did that mean? Rescue? Or something far worse? She turned toward her tactical display. The long-range scanners began to react. Ripples in the void, faint distortions that marked the arrival of ships moving faster than light. But these weren't small vessels or merchant craft. These were enormous. Each distortion showed something the size of a floating city, and there were dozens of them. "Multiple contacts," the sensor officer shouted. "They're dropping out of FTL right on top of us." Outside, space tore open as massive black ships appeared one by one, silent and perfect in formation. Their hulls were dark, marked with strange angular symbols and battle scars that glowed faint red in the light of distant stars. The largest ship dwarfed the Aelari fleet. Its engines burned like blue suns. No one spoke. The humans didn't announce themselves again. They didn't send a greeting or a warning. Instead, beams of energy swept through the debris field. They were scanning every wreck, searching for survivors. The Aelari watched as smaller Terran vessels, dark gray shuttles, launched from the giant warships and began docking with their damaged cruisers. A voice came through the comm again, different this time. A woman's voice, firm and focused. "Attention Aelari vessels. You are under Terran protection. Medical teams are boarding. Remain where you are." The crew looked at Alara, waiting for her to decide. Her instinct screamed at her to run, to hide, but there was nowhere to go. The Terran ships surrounded them completely, a silent wall of steel and power. Moments later, heavy footsteps echoed down the hall outside the bridge. The door opened and tall figures in black armor stepped inside. Their helmets reflected the pale light of the dying ship. They carried weapons that hummed softly, but they did not raise them. The lead Terran spoke through a translator. His tone was calm, but it carried weight. "You're safe now," he said simply. Alara looked at him, uncertain. "Are we?" she asked quietly. He didn't answer right away. His gaze drifted to the shattered viewport, to the burning stars beyond. Then he nodded once. "No one hunts refugees under our watch." Alara felt something stir in her chest. Fear, yes, but also something else. Hope, maybe. But as the Terrans began to work, sealing bulkheads and stabilizing the ship, she couldn't shake one thought from her mind. They had called for help, and the universe had answered. But maybe, just maybe, they had sent their SOS to the wrong race. The Terran ships moved like living shadows, silent and efficient. Their massive hulls blocked out the stars as they formed a protective ring around the shattered Aelari fleet. The humans didn't waste words. They didn't make speeches or demand gratitude. They simply worked. Their boarding parties moved through the wrecked ships like a well-trained storm, sealing hull breaches, setting up power relays, and stabilizing life support systems that had been failing for days. Captain Alara stood on her bridge, watching as a group of Terran engineers patched into her ship's systems. Their armor hissed quietly, vents releasing steam into the cold air. The humans were larger than the Aelari, heavier, their movements deliberate and controlled. When one of them lifted a reactor conduit that would have taken 4 Aelari to move, Alara realized the stories about their strength were not exaggerations. One of the Terrans noticed her watching. He lifted his helmet visor, revealing pale skin and dark eyes that held no fear, only focus. "We'll have your main reactor online in 20 minutes, he said. His voice was deep, but his tone was oddly calm, almost gentle. Alara nodded slowly. You came all this way for us?" The human paused before answering. "We heard your call," he said simply. "That's what we do." She wanted to ask more, but before she could, her communications officer turned toward her. "Captain, we're detecting incoming signals. Multiple contacts. They're closing fast." Every Terran in the room froze for half a second, then moved instantly. One tapped his wrist console. "Admiral Reyes, this is Bravo team on Aelari Cruiser Theta. We have hostiles inbound." The Admiral's voice came through, calm and cold. "Acknowledged. All hands to battle stations. Keep the refugees under shield cover." Ilara's heart sank. She didn't need a scanner to know who it was. The Varkun had found them. Out in the void, the darkness split apart again as dozens of Varkun warships exited hyperspace. Their hulls glowed with cruel red light, like wounds tearing open the night. The Aelari bridge filled with alarms. Their remaining weapons were useless. The Varkun were already charging their plasma batteries. The Terrans didn't hesitate. They moved as one. From the flagship TNS Dauntless, the Terran Armada began to reposition. Huge ships glided between the Aelari and their hunters, forming a living wall. Energy shields flared to life, glowing faint blue against the incoming fire. "Fire control, target the lead ships," Admiral Reyes ordered. Full spread, staggered impact. "Let's show them what mercy looks like when it's running out." Alara watched on her screen as the Terrans unleashed their first strike. It was like watching a supernova. Lances of light cut through space, crossing impossible distances in a heartbeat. The Varkun's leading cruiser didn't even have time to maneuver before it was hit. Once, twice, 3 times, and then it was gone, vaporized in silence. And then it was gone, vaporized in silence. The Aelari gasped. They had seen battles before, but nothing like this. The Terrans didn't fight with emotion or noise. Their formation didn't break, not once. Every volley was timed to the millisecond, every ship moving with perfect coordination. The Varkun tried to scatter, but the humans were faster. Smaller Terran ships darted forward, releasing what looked like swarms of glowing darts. They weren't missiles. They were drones, each one a tiny predator, tracking targets through debris and countermeasures. Within minutes, the second wave of Varkun ships was burning, the comms filled with Varkun chatter, confused, angry, panicked. The Ayalari listened in disbelief as the predators of their nightmares began to sound afraid. Ilara leaned toward her tactical officer. "How many Terran ships are we seeing?" 73 confirmed, he said. "Maybe more. But their power signatures. Captain, even our scanners can't read their upper limits. It's like trying to measure a sun." As she watched, a single Terran destroyer broke formation and charged a much larger Varkun battleship. It didn't slow down. The human vessel rammed it head-on, its shields burning white-hot. The Aelari expected to see it destroyed, but instead it tore through the enemy ship like a blade through glass. Both vessels vanished in a flash of light. The bridge went silent. Ilara whispered, "They sacrificed themselves." A nearby Terran overheard her. "Not a sacrifice," he said softly. "A calculation." It took less than 15 minutes for the entire Varkun force to fall apart. Their surviving ships fled, engines screaming into hyperspace. The Terrans didn't chase. Not yet. They simply watched them go. When the last red light vanished from the screen, Admiral Reyes's voice came through every speaker in the fleet. "This is the Terran Armada," he said. "The threat has been neutralized. Begin recovery operations. The Aelari will be transferred to medical support vessels immediately." The crew of Ilara's ship sat in stunned silence. They were alive, but the reality hadn't yet settled in. They had been seconds away from annihilation, and now their enemies were dust. Ilara turned to one of the Terran officers beside her. Why did you do this?" she asked quietly. "You don't even know us. The others in the galaxy fear you. Some say you destroy everything you touch." The officer adjusted his armor, looking out the cracked viewport. "Maybe they're right," he said. "We destroy the ones who deserve it." He turned back to her, his expression unreadable. "You were hunted. That's enough for us." Before Ilara could reply, the Terran comm officer on her bridge received another transmission. "Admiral Reyes to all ships. Prepare jump coordinates. We're not done here." Ilara frowned. "Not done? The Varkun are gone." The Terran smiled faintly beneath his visor. "Not yet," he said. "We're going to their home." Outside, the Terran fleet began to move again, engines igniting with the light of distant stars. The Aelari watched in awe as space rippled and the Deathworlder Armada vanished into the void, leaving behind a silence so deep it felt holy. Ilara stared at the empty stars long after they were gone. Somewhere deep inside, she realized something terrifying and beautiful all at once. The Terrans didn't come to conquer. They came to end. And now, the hunters would learn what it meant to be hunted. The Terran fleet emerged from hyperspace, like a storm made of steel and fury. Before them hung the Varkun home system, a cluster of cold red stars surrounded by ringed planets and blackened moons. It was not a beautiful place. The Aelari, watching from a safe distance aboard their damaged cruiser, could see that even from here. The worlds below were scarred, their atmospheres stained with the smoke of endless wars. The Varkun didn't build for peace. They built to dominate. Admiral Reyes stood on the command deck of the TNS Dauntless, hands clasped behind his back. His face was calm, unreadable, but his eyes never left the tactical display. The entire Varkun fleet was massed in orbit around their primary world, hundreds of ships, maybe thousands. They had drawn together for protection, confident that their numbers and fortresses would keep them safe. Reyes spoke quietly, almost to himself. "They think numbers are safety." His first officer, Commander Hale, nodded. "Permission to disprove that, sir?" Reyes gave a thin smile. "Granted." Across the Terran Armada, engines flared to life. Shields brightened. "Weapons charged." It was not the chaotic energy of panic. It was the slow, deliberate breath before a predator's strike. Back aboard the Aelari ship, Elara stood with her crew, watching the spectacle unfold from the Terran live feed shared through the fleet network. She didn't understand the humans' weapons or their formations, but she understood what she saw: control, purpose, vengeance wrapped in silence. The Varkun fleet hailed the humans first. A harsh guttural voice filled the comms. "This is High Warlord Dren of the Varkun Dominion. You trespass in our sovereign system. Leave now or be erased." Reyes didn't reply immediately. He studied the voice transmission, his eyes narrowing as if trying to read the soul of the speaker. Then he said, "This is Admiral Reyes of the Terran Armada. You hunted refugees. You burned their worlds. You left children to die in the void. You're not sovereign. You're a plague." There was a pause, then the warlord's voice returned, mocking. "We do as we wish. Weak species exist to serve the strong." Reyes's voice dropped low, quiet enough that the bridge crew leaned in to hear. "Then let's see how strong you are when the galaxy stops looking away." He raised his hand. "Engage!" The first Terran salvo was silent until it arrived. 1,000 beams of coherent plasma lanced through space, each one guided by targeting algorithms so precise they pierced shields and armor like they were nothing. Varkun ships burst apart in waves of light. The response fire came seconds later, chaos and fury from the Varkun guns, but most of it never landed. Terran shield harmonics shifted faster than the enemy could track. Then came the drones. Hundreds of small, needle-like ships launched from the Terran carriers. They moved like a swarm of living light, slipping between enemy vessels, planting charges and detonating from within. The Varkun fleet began to fracture. Elara and her crew watched, transfixed. She whispered, "It's not a battle, it's an execution." Her science officer nodded slowly. "No waste, no hesitation. Every shot has purpose." But what struck her most wasn't the destruction, it was the restraint. The Terrans weren't firing on the planet below. Their weapons were locked on the warships and orbital stations. They were careful, deliberate, almost surgical. Within half an hour, the Varkun orbital fleet was in ruins. Thousands of ships drifted as broken metal, flames flickering like dying stars. The few survivors fled toward the planet's surface, but the Terrans didn't follow immediately. They surrounded the world, silent and patient. Commander Hale approached Reyes. "Sir, the orbital defenses are down. We can glass the planet. End it." Reyes didn't answer at first. His gaze stayed fixed on the red sphere spinning below. "We could," he said at last. "But if we do, they'll never understand why they lost." He gave a signal, and the fleet adjusted course. Dozens of Terran dropships launched, descending through the clouds toward the main Varkun citadel. The Aelari, horrified yet unable to look away, followed the feed as the dropships cut through atmosphere and landed amid fire. Varkun ground troops swarmed toward the invaders, weapons blazing. But the humans advanced like ghosts, disciplined, efficient, unbreakable. Their armor absorbed fire that would have melted steel. Their rifles sang, precise and deadly. One Terran squad breached the gates of the Varkun command fortress. Inside, the corridors were black stone and glowing veins of red energy. The warlord stood at the heart of it all, armored in bone and gold, surrounded by guards. The lead human stepped forward, removing his helmet. He was pale, dark-haired, his eyes as cold as space. "You don't get to call yourself a ruler anymore," he said. The warlord laughed, baring rows of fangs. "You think this changes anything? Kill me and others will rise. The strong always rule." The Terran's reply was soft. "Maybe, but today the strong stand for the weak." He raised his weapon and fired once. The shot echoed through the citadel. Above, the Terran fleet released a signal. Not one of conquest, but of warning. A transmission encoded in every known galactic language, broadcast across 1,000 systems. "To those who prey upon the helpless, your age is over. The Deathworlders have heard the cries of the hunted." In the quiet that followed, the Terrans began withdrawing their ground forces. They didn't burn the planet. They didn't destroy the cities. They left the warlords' banners where they fell, and they left behind food, medicine, and a message. When the Alari ships reconnected with the fleet, Alara was silent for a long time. Finally, she said, "You could have wiped them out." "Why didn't you?" Admiral Reyes appeared on the holo screen, his expression unreadable. "Because extinction teaches nothing. But living with defeat, that teaches forever." The channel closed. The Alari fleet floated among the Terrans, surrounded by strength but protected by something far stranger. Mercy. Not the soft mercy of the naive, but the cold, deliberate mercy of those who had once known pain so deep it changed their bones. Alara stood at her viewport, staring into the stars. The galaxy would tell stories about this day, she knew. About the Deathworlders who answered a call for help and turned it into a reckoning. And for the first time, she wondered if the humans' terrible world hadn't cursed them at all. Maybe it had. Maybe it had. Made them exactly what the galaxy needed. The Alari fleet followed the Terrans back to the edge of known space. Their ships moved under the protection of the human armada, which seemed to glide effortlessly through the void, leaving ripples of gravity in its wake. The Varkun had fallen silent. No retaliation came. No ships trailed behind. The predators of the galaxy had been humbled, and word of it was spreading faster than light. Every species that had once ignored the cries of the weak now whispered the same question. Who are the Deathworlders, really? Captain Alara stood in the viewing bay of her repaired cruiser, staring at the enormous shape of the TNS Dauntless ahead. Its hull looked alive, scarred but glowing faintly from recent battle. She couldn't decide what frightened her more, that these humans had such power, or that they used it not for conquest, but for protection. A transmission chimed through her console. The screen flickered, and the face of Admiral Reyes appeared, tired, stern, but not unkind. "Captain Alara," he said, "how are your people holding up?" "We are recovering," she replied carefully. "Your engineers have done more for us in 2 days than the Galactic Council ever did in decades." Reyes gave a small nod. "We do what needs to be done. No one else will." Alara hesitated, then asked the question that had haunted her since the first battle. "Admiral, why did you come for us? You didn't even know who we were. Why risk your fleet for strangers?" For a long moment, Reyes said nothing. He looked away from the camera, his gaze distant, as if seeing something long buried. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter. "Because once we were the ones calling for help." And no one answered. Alara didn't know how to respond. The silence between them was heavy, filled with the weight of something older than either of their races. Reyes continued, "When humanity first reached the stars, we thought we were joining a community. We learned otherwise. The others saw what we were, what our world made us, and they turned away. They called us savages, Deathworlders, monsters in the shape of men." He leaned closer, his expression unreadable. "They were right in a way. Our home forged us. The rain there burns. The air kills. Every living thing fights to survive. But we learned something none of them did. We learned that mercy has value because it's hard. That kindness means more when it comes from strength. That's why we fight, not for power, but to make sure no one else dies calling for help in the dark." Alara felt a chill run through her. It wasn't fear this time. It was something closer to awe. The transmission ended, but his words stayed with her long after. That night, if one could call the endless dark of space night, she walked through her ship's medbay. A dozen of her crew were still recovering, some with human medics standing over them. She stopped beside one of the Terrans, a young woman with close-cropped hair and a scar across her cheek. "Why do you help us?" Alara asked quietly. "You've lost people because of us." The human medic smiled faintly without looking up. "Because someone helped me once," she said. "That's how it starts. One act at a time." Alara left the medbay in silence, her thoughts spinning. The humans weren't what she had imagined. They were contradictions, warmth and violence, mercy and fire. Somehow all of it fit together. A few days later, the Alari were invited aboard the Dauntless. Reyes wanted to discuss what would come next. As Alara stepped into the command deck, she felt the strange weight of the place, the quiet hum of immense power, the disciplined focus of the crew. Every officer seemed carved from purpose. Reyes stood at the center, studying a holographic display of star systems. When he saw her, he gestured toward it. "These are the frontier colonies," he said. "Small worlds, barely defended. The Varkun raided most of them. We've been getting distress signals from several." Ilara frowned. "More refugees? More victims," he corrected. "And more silence from the council." He looked up at her, his eyes hard but steady. "We can't be everywhere, but we'll be where it matters. We're forming something new, a coalition of species who believe the same thing we do. That strength exists to protect, not to rule." "The Aelari could help us?" Ilara's breath caught. "You want an alliance?" "I want a promise," Rhea said. "That when someone calls for help, we answer together." She studied him for a long moment, then extended her hand. "Then you have it." The Admiral shook her hand firmly, and for a brief instant, she felt the weight of what that meant. A Deathworlder's promise wasn't just words. It was a vow carved into the bones of their kind. Later, as the Aelari ship detached from the Dauntless, Ilara stood at her viewport once again. Below her, the Terran fleet was scattering into the dark, heading toward distant stars, chasing new distress calls. They were relentless. Her second officer joined her quietly. "Do you trust them?" he asked. Ilara didn't answer immediately. She watched the Terran ships vanish into the folds of hyperspace, leaving trails of pale blue light behind them. "No," she said at last. "But I believe in them." He frowned. "Is there a difference?" "Yes," she said softly. "Trust is given to those we know. Belief is for those who show us what we never thought possible." Outside, the stars shimmered, endless and cold. Somewhere out there, other voices were crying for help, their messages vanishing into the dark. But now, Ilara thought, maybe the dark wasn't so empty anymore, because somewhere the Deathworlders were listening, and when they answered, the galaxy itself trembled. The message spread faster than the humans could control it. Across the star lanes, through encrypted channels and whispered rumors, the story of the Deathworlder Armada became legend. Worlds that had never dared speak against the Varkun now whispered of rebellion. Slave species began to rise, quiet at first, then louder. Every corner of the galaxy buzzed with the same phrase. The humans came. The Galactic Council met in emergency session for the first time in centuries. Representatives from hundreds of species crowded into the shining chambers on Varela Prime, arguing over what to do. To the Council, the Terrans were a problem. They were not part of the political machine. They didn't answer to laws or treaties. They answered only to their own moral compass, a compass forged in storms and blood. Councillor Tassal of the Kathir pounded his clawed hand on the table. "They have unleashed chaos! The Varkun were monsters, yes, but the humans have upset the balance. They cannot be allowed to act unchecked," a quiet voice answered from across the chamber. "Would you prefer the Varkun still be hunting refugees through your space?" It was Ambassador Corrin of the Aelari. She had taken Ilara's place at this meeting, representing her people's new alliance. Her calm words cut through the noise like a blade. "We called for help. None of you came. The Deathworlders did. Now you're afraid because they showed you what courage looks like." The room erupted in arguments again, but her words had struck a nerve. Even the loudest critics could not deny what the Terrans had accomplished. They had done what the Council never dared. They acted. Far from the polished halls of Varela, Admiral Reyes sat in his command chair aboard the TNS Dauntless, staring at the newest transmission. It wasn't from the Council. It was from one of their ships, a Terran patrol near the edge of the Orion Verge. The message was simple but chilling. "Distress beacon detected. Signal origin unknown. Coordinates attached. Transmission repeating. They're coming back." Reyes didn't hesitate. "Plot a jump. Full fleet. Let's find out who's coming." The Terran Armada tore through hyperspace, leaving ripples in the dark. The coordinates led them to a dead world, barren, ash-gray, orbiting a dim red sun. Scattered across the surface were ruins of something ancient half buried in dust, and above it, suspended in the void like ghosts, were ships, hundreds of them. But they weren't Varkun. They were something older. Sensors began to scream with interference. Strange energy fields rippled around the derelicts. The hulls pulsed faintly with blue light, like veins under translucent skin. They were alive, or something close to it. "Organic technology," said Commander Hale, his voice low. These designs predate every known civilization. How is this possible? Before anyone could answer, the ships moved. The derelicts came to life all at once, their hulls splitting open, revealing massive bioweapons that glowed like burning suns. The comms filled with static, and then, through the noise, a voice spoke. Ancient, echoing, almost human but not quite. Deathworlders, your flame burns bright, but you meddle in things beyond your kind. You have awakened the architects. Every ship on the Terran line went to red alert. Reyes leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Identify the source. Unknown, sir. It's coming from multiple vessels simultaneously. The Aelari cruiser, now part of the fleet, transmitted urgently. Admiral, our databases mention the architects only in myth. Builders of the first civilizations. The ones who vanished before the Council existed. They were believed extinct. Extinct doesn't talk, Reyes muttered. The enemy ships began to move toward them, fluid and silent. Their weapons didn't fire, they grew. The glowing cores expanded into shapes the sensors couldn't classify, things that looked alive and wrong. Targeting systems failing, Hale shouted. They're jamming our AI cores. Reyes didn't blink. Manual targeting, old school. The Terran fleet opened fire. Rail guns, plasma batteries, and kinetic slugs screamed through space, tearing into the strange ships. The blasts hit, and the enemy vessels healed. Metal reformed. Holes closed. The ancient ships returned fire, beams of light cutting through shields like paper. The first human frigate was vaporized in seconds. The rest began evasive maneuvers, spreading out, adapting. Reyes spoke through gritted teeth. They're regenerating. Focus fire, don't let them recover. The Dauntless shuddered as a beam sliced across its hull, leaving molten metal dripping into the void. For the first time in his career, Reyes felt something he hadn't in years: uncertainty. These things weren't enemies in the way he understood. They were testing him, studying. Then, through the noise of battle, the voice came again, clearer this time. You protect the weak. You fight for balance. Yet you are chaos embodied. Your kind spreads fire where others built light. Why should you exist? Reyes answered without hesitation, his voice steady. Because the galaxy needs someone who remembers what pain feels like. The silence that followed was heavy, almost thoughtful. The enemy ship stopped moving. The energy fields dimmed slightly. Then the voice said softly, Perhaps you are not as blind as the others. And just like that, the ancient fleet vanished. No explosion, no retreat, gone, as if they had never been there at all. The Terran ships floated in stunned silence. Systems flickered, fires burned, and wounded officers shouted reports, but Reyes didn't hear any of it. He was staring at the empty void where the enemy had been. Hale approached carefully. Sir, what just happened? Reyes's jaw tightened. We were measured. Ilara's voice came through from the Aelari ship, quiet but urgent. Admiral, the architects, if they're real, then everything we know about the galaxy is a lie. Reyes finally turned toward her transmission. Then it's time someone told the truth. Outside, the stars burned quietly. The Terrans began repairs, but every soul aboard the Armada knew something had shifted. They had stood before the oldest power in existence, and survived. Yet somewhere deep in the void, unseen and waiting, something watched them back. And it whispered in the ancient tongue of creation itself, the Deathworlders have awakened the past. Let us see what they do with the fire. The battle with the architects left scars that no repair system could hide. The Terran fleet drifted in the quiet aftermath, hulls scorched, systems damaged, and hearts heavy with questions that none of their science officers could answer. The galaxy had just changed, again, and no one was ready for it. The Aelari, still shaken from what they had witnessed, followed in the wake of the Terrans, their small ships moving like fragile shadows behind the armada of Titans. On the bridge of the TNS Dauntless, Admiral Reyes stood alone before the wide viewport. The stars stretched endlessly before him, and yet they felt closer than ever, as if something vast and ancient now stared back. His reflection looked older, harder, the faint glint of exhaustion in his eyes. He had fought monsters, tyrants, and nightmares of flesh and metal. But this was different. The architects had not tried to destroy them. They had judged them. "Sir," came Commander Hale's voice from behind him. "Repairs are at 70%. Fleet readiness at 48. The Elari ships are requesting resupply. They've lost more than half their fuel reserves." Reyes nodded absently. "Send what we can spare." Hale hesitated. "You think they'll come back? The architects?" Reyes turned his gaze toward the dark. "No," he said quietly. "They don't need to. They've already decided what we are." Hale frowned. "And what's that?" Reyes didn't answer. He didn't have to. They both knew. Humanity had been measured, weighed, and, for now, left alive. That was mercy enough. Meanwhile, aboard the Elari flagship Seren's Light, Captain Elara recorded her report to the newly formed coalition of free worlds. The Elari, Terrans, and a handful of minor species had agreed to stand together, a fragile alliance held not by politics, but by shared fear and newfound faith. Her voice trembled slightly as she spoke. The Terrans stood against something beyond comprehension. We owe them not only our lives, but our courage. We are not the same people we were before their arrival. The galaxy isn't either. The old powers will resist. They'll try to hide behind laws and treaties. But the universe just showed us that none of that matters anymore. We are ants beneath the eyes of gods, and only those who stand together will survive their gaze. When she finished, she turned off the recorder and stared out into space. She could see the Terran ships moving in formation, their drive trails glowing faintly blue. To her, they looked like watchful guardians, dangerous but steadfast. A soft voice spoke behind her. It was Lieutenant Sira, her communications officer. "Do you trust them now?" Elara smiled faintly. "No," she said. "But I understand them." The lieutenant tilted her head. "And what do you understand?" "That they don't fight because they love war," Elara said. "They fight because they remember what helplessness feels like. That's something the rest of the galaxy forgot a long time ago." As if to prove her point, the main holodisplay flickered to life. A distress signal appeared, weak but persistent. Another cry for help. A mining colony near the rim had gone silent after strange lights appeared in the sky. The transmission ended abruptly with static. Elara and Sira exchanged glances. They didn't need to discuss it. The signal had been received by the Terrans as well. Within minutes, the entire Deathworlder fleet shifted course. The colony lay on the edge of a dying star, a small world wrapped in clouds of dust and plasma. When the Terrans arrived, they found devastation. The mining settlement was gone. No signs of life, only twisted metal and scorch marks across the sand. Reyes ordered a scan, and what they found chilled every living being in the fleet. The ground itself was moving. The sand wasn't sand, it was machines. Tiny, microscopic drones, swarming and devouring everything organic. "Nanophage," muttered Hale. "But there's no known tech like this. It's rewriting matter." Reyes stared at the readings, his voice low. "It's not Varkun. It's not Council tech. This is different." From the corner of the sensor station, an officer whispered. Maybe the architects didn't leave after all. Moments later, the swarm rose from the surface in a vast, shifting cloud that shimmered like liquid metal. It spoke through the comms in a voice that wasn't human, wasn't mechanical. It was both. "You burn and you build. You destroy and you save. We have watched your kind since before your son had a name. You call yourselves Deathworlders. That name is true, but you misunderstand it." The fleet froze. Reyes answered, his tone calm but sharp. "Then enlighten us." "You think your strength comes from violence," the voice said. "But it is your fear that gives you power. The will to survive is the will to create. Every death world breeds not destruction, but defiance. We made your kind to remember that." Hale's eyes widened. "They're saying they made us?" Reyes ignored him. "Why tell us this now?" The voice shifted, almost curious. "Because the others are awakening. The ones who fled when we fell asleep. The galaxy you think you've saved is only the first spark in a greater fire. We will see what you do when the dark truly returns." The cloud began to dissipate, breaking apart like dust in sunlight. Scanners showed nothing but residual heat. Reyes stood in silence, feeling the weight of the moment press into his bones. "Made them? That wasn't possible. Or maybe it was." Elara's transmission came through, her voice steady but heavy. "Admiral, what does this mean?" Reyes looked out the viewport, his expression unreadable. It means the universe just told us we're part of something bigger than anyone ever imagined. He turned to his crew. Signal the fleet. Double patrols. Prepare the colony worlds. Whatever's coming, we'll be ready. And as the Terran ships drifted back into formation, their engines humming like the heartbeat of a sleeping beast, one truth echoed through the stars. The Deathworlders had not been chosen by fate. They had been built by it. And now the ones who built them were watching to see if their creation would burn the universe or save it. The message from the architects changed everything. Even among the Deathworlders who had faced horrors and fought gods in metal skin, this was something different. To be told they were made, engineered by ancient hands that shaped the galaxy before their sun was born, cut deeper than any battle wound. It wasn't just history that shifted. It was identity. The Terran Armada drifted at the edge of the dying system, its ships silent except for the faint hum of reactors and the echo of whispered questions that no one dared voice aloud. The Ilari fleet, smaller and more fragile, lingered nearby. Both groups waited for orders that didn't come. Admiral Reyes had locked himself in the command chamber of the TNS Dauntless. Inside, he stood before a holodisplay that showed the galaxy in full. Points of light marked hundreds of civilizations, most ignorant of what had just awakened beyond the stars. The architects had spoken and then vanished. But their words hung in his mind. The others are awakening. He ran his hands over the table, the surface cold and smooth. Humanity had clawed its way from mud and ruin, from storms and extinction, believing every step had been their own. To learn that it might have been by design, it stung. Yet, under the sting, there was something else, a sense of inevitability. There was something else, a sense of inevitability. When Commander Hale entered, the doors sealed behind him. "Sir," he said quietly, "the Coalition Council is demanding a report. The Aelari, the Seraphites, even the Sithra, they all want to know what happened on the colony world." Reyes didn't look up. "Tell them the truth." "Which part?" Hale asked. "All of it." There was silence, broken only by the faint hum of the engines. "Sir," Hale said at last, "if what the architects said is true, if they really made us, then everything changes. We're not just another species, we're something built for a purpose." Reyes turned then, and his expression was hard. "Purpose doesn't change what we are. We bleed, we feel, we choose. No matter who made us, we're still human. That's the difference. The architects might have started something, but we're the ones who finished it." Hale nodded, but unease lingered in his eyes. A sudden alert interrupted them. The ship's AI spoke, voice steady but sharp. "Admiral, long-range sensors have detected new anomalies. Multiple FTL signatures, non-linear trajectories. Unknown origin," Reyes straightened. "Location?" "Border of the Orion Expanse," the AI replied. "Projected contact in 3 hours." "Raise the fleet," Reyes ordered. "All ships to readiness. Signal the Alari and the Coalition vessels. Whatever's coming, we face it together." The Armada moved like a single organism. Damaged ships were patched, weapons charged, and fighter wings launched into the void. The Aelari joined the formation, their smaller vessels weaving among the Terran giants like silver fish around whales. As they approached the expanse, the stars themselves seemed to bend. Space shimmered, folding into itself, and out of the distortion came shapes, vast and graceful, unlike any ship the galaxy had seen. They weren't metal, not exactly. Their hulls glowed with threads of living energy, pulsing in rhythm, as if each ship had a heartbeat. The voice that filled the comms was deep, layered, and old. "We are the SLR. We were the first to flee when the architects fell. We remember their fire. And now we smell it again, burning in you, children of a death world." Alara's voice came through from the Aelari flagship. "Admiral, they're not attacking." "Not yet." Reyes leaned forward. "Then let's see what they want." He opened a channel. "This is Admiral Reyes of the Terran Armada. We don't seek war." The SLR ship nearest to them shifted, its hull flaring like wings of light. "War follows you whether you seek it or not. The architects made you as a weapon. You were their last defense against us, but they failed. They always fail." Reyes felt the weight of those words settle over the crew. Made as a weapon. The idea wasn't foreign. It fit too neatly, too well. Humans had always been drawn to conflict, molded by survival, tempered by fear. But hearing it spoken by something older than time itself made the air grow heavy. He answered anyway. "If we were made to fight you, then maybe that's exactly what we'll do." The SLR's laughter was like thunder in the bones. "You think you can destroy what shaped the stars? You are fragments, fire left in dying embers. But perhaps you burn bright enough to matter." Without warning, the SLR ships released a pulse, an invisible wave that swept through the fleet. Systems flickered, shields dimmed, and alarms screamed. The Alari ships buckled first, their smaller reactors overloading. Terran vessels held firm, engines roaring in defiance. "Fire!" Reyes shouted. The Armada responded. Railguns roared, plasma cannons thundered, and the void lit with fury. Beams of molten light struck the SLR ships, tearing through their elegant armor. Yet where metal should have shattered, it dissolved into energy and reformed seconds later. The battle was chaos and awe. The Terrans fought like they always did, without retreat, without hesitation. The Ayalari provided cover fire, their beams slicing through the haze. But the SLR were unlike anything they'd ever faced. They didn't fight to win. They fought to test. Reyes saw it then, the same pattern as before. The architects had measured them. Now the SLR were doing the same. The Dauntless took a direct hit. The deck trembled. Sparks rained from the ceiling. Hail gripped the railing. "We can't outgun them, sir." Reyes steadied himself. "Then we outlast them." He turned to the comms. "Broadcast to all ships. Hold the line. They want to know what we are? Show them!" Across the void, the Terran fleet dug in, shields burning white-hot, every ship fighting as if it were the last. For hours they held, refusing to fall. The SLR's barrage slowed, then stopped. "Enough," the alien voice said at last. "You are not yet ready, but you are not lost. When the final dawn comes, we will see what your kind truly is." And then, like their predecessors, the SLR vanished, leaving nothing but fading echoes and silence. The crew of the Dauntless stood in stunned quiet. Ilara's transmission came through, her voice trembling. "Admiral!" "What now?" Reyes exhaled slowly. "Now?" He looked at the stars, their light reflected in the scars on the viewport. "Now we prepare. Because whatever's coming next, it's older than gods and bigger than war." He turned to his crew, his voice steady and low. "The galaxy thinks of us as Deathworlders. Let's make sure that when the end comes, they remember what that really means." And as the fleet regrouped, the Terran engines lit the void like burning suns. Somewhere beyond the edge of space, ancient powers stirred and whispered. The architects of creation had returned, and the children of a deadly world were waiting for them.